From a heartbroken comedy legend too frail to film his cameo to a president who confused the sweat hogs with rodents, the Brooklyn classroom that launched John Travolta's career harbored some truly bizarre secrets. Behind the laughs and catchphrases lay strange casting mishaps, mysterious lunchbox artwork that stumped investigators, and merchandise so extensive it included ice cream flavors. These are the 15 weird facts about Welcome Back, Kotter, 1975, you never knew. Fact 1. Groucho Marx's tragic hidden cameo attempt. One of the most heartbreaking moments in Welcome Back, Kotter's history happened when the show's biggest comedy hero came to visit, but the encounter left everyone wishing it had never occurred. Gabe Kaplan, who played the title character, was a massive fan of Groucho Marx and regularly performed impressions of the legendary comedian throughout the series, basing the entire dynamic of the Sweat Hogs on the Marx Brothers' comedic style. In 1976, during the show's second season, the producers arranged for the 86-year-old Groucho Marx to make a special cameo appearance in an episode called Sadie Hawkins Day. The plan was simple and perfect. Kotter would do his usual Groucho impression, and then the real Groucho would appear to react to it, creating a magical moment for television history. When October 26th arrived, everyone on set was buzzing with excitement as Groucho Marx arrived at the studio with his assistant, Aaron Fleming. But the moment he appeared, it became clear that something was terribly wrong. According to Mark Evanier, who worked on the show and witnessed the entire incident firsthand, Groucho was barely able to walk and seemed completely unaware of his surroundings. He had to lean heavily on Fleming just to move around, and his mental state was so deteriorated that he couldn't hold a conversation. The excited cast members and crew who had eagerly gathered to meet their comedy idol were devastated by what they saw. Several people actually left the set in tears, saying they didn't want to remember Groucho in such a fragile condition. The planned scene was immediately canceled, and they decided not to film anything with him at all. Even though publicity photos were taken of Groucho sitting in Kotter's classroom chair with the cast surrounding him, those pictures were never released to the public. According to witnesses, the decision was made to destroy the photos entirely to preserve Groucho's dignity and protect his legendary image. However, the real reason behind Groucho's appearance became clear when Fleming used the opportunity to pitch herself for a future guest role on the show, suggesting that the visit was more about her career ambitions than any genuine desire for Groucho to appear on television. Fact 2. The show's title was born from songwriter's block. The iconic name Welcome Back, Kotter actually exists because a talented songwriter couldn't make words work with the original title, leading to one of the most successful theme songs in television history. When the show was first developed, it was simply called Kotter, named after the main character Gabe Kotter. And that's exactly what former Lovin' Spoonful frontman John Sebastian was told when he was hired to write the theme song. Sebastian, who had already achieved fame with hits like Do You Believe in Magic and Daydream with his band The Lovin' Spoonful, sat down to craft lyrics that would work with the show's original one-word title. However, he quickly ran into a creative wall that seemed impossible to overcome. No matter how hard he tried, Sebastian simply could not come up with any good words that rhymed with Kotter and would make sense in a television theme song. He considered obvious options like otter, blotter, and daughter. But none of these words could be worked into lyrics that captured the spirit of a comedy about a teacher returning to his old high school. The rhyming problem was so frustrating that Sebastian decided to completely abandon the idea of using the show's title in the song altogether. Instead of forcing awkward rhymes, Sebastian took a completely different approach and wrote a mid-tempo number with a touch of melancholy that focused on the broader concept of the show rather than the specific character name. He crafted Welcome Back, a warm and nostalgic song about someone returning to their roots and the place where they belonged, which perfectly captured the premise of Gabe Kotter going back to teach at his old school. When Sebastian played the finished song for the network executives, they were so impressed with Welcome Back that they made an unprecedented decision. Rather than asking him to rewrite the song to match the show's title, they chose to change the show's title to match his song. The series was renamed Welcome Back, Kotter, and Sebastian's theme song went on to become a #1 hit on the Billboard pop chart for 1 week in May of 1976, proving that sometimes creative obstacles can lead to even better solutions than originally planned. Fact 3. Presidential confusion at the White House. Even the President of the United States wasn't immune to getting confused about Welcome Back, Kotter's most famous group of students, leading to an embarrassing moment that perfectly captured how widespread the show's popularity had become. In 1977, during the height of the series' success, Gabe Kaplan received a special invitation to visit the White House and meet President Jimmy Carter, which was a significant honor for any television star at the time. The meeting was part of Carter's efforts to connect with popular culture figures and show that he was in touch with what ordinary Americans were watching and enjoying. Welcome Back. Kotter was one of the most talked-about shows on television, and the Sweat Hogs had become household names across the country, so it made perfect sense for the president to want to meet the man behind the popular series. During their conversation at the White House, President Carter and Gabe Kaplan discussed the show and its impact on American television. The president seemed genuinely interested in the series and appeared to be familiar with its basic premise about a teacher working with a group of remedial students in a Brooklyn high school. However, when it came time for Kaplan to leave, Carter made a comment that revealed he wasn't quite as familiar with the show's details as he might have seemed. As Kaplan was preparing to return to California to continue working on the series, President Carter offered him a friendly farewell message to take back to his co-stars. "And when you go back to California," Carter told him, "say hello to the groundhogs." The president had completely mangled the name of the show's central group of students, confusing the Sweat Hogs with groundhogs, which are small, burrowing animals rather than high school students. This mix-up was particularly amusing because the name Sweat Hogs was such an integral part of the show's identity and had been mentioned countless times in episodes, interviews, and promotional materials. The term referred to the remedial students who attended classes on the top floor of their school, which had no air conditioning and got extremely hot, hence the nickname combining sweat and hogs. Carter's confusion between sweating students and underground rodents became a memorable example of how even powerful political figures could get their pop culture references hilariously wrong. Fact 4. Boston banned the show due to race riots. Welcome Back. Kotter became the victim of real-world racial tensions when one major city refused to air the show, fearing that its diverse classroom setting might make an already explosive situation even worse. In September of 1974, just 1 year before the show's premiere, the city of Boston had implemented a court-ordered busing system designed to desegregate public schools by transporting students between different neighborhoods to achieve racial balance. This mandatory desegregation program triggered a series of violent riots throughout Boston, with angry crowds attacking school buses, throwing rocks at students, and creating dangerous situations that required police protection for children simply trying to get to school. The racial tensions were so severe that they dominated news coverage and created an atmosphere of fear and uncertainty that lasted well into 1975, when Welcome Back, Kotter was preparing to make its television debut. When the show was scheduled to premiere on September 9, 1975, executives at WCVB, Boston's local ABC affiliate, made an unprecedented decision to refuse to broadcast the series. The station's management was deeply concerned that Welcome Back, Kotter's central premise of an ethnically diverse classroom, might be seen as either promoting or mocking the very type of integrated education that had caused such violent reactions in their city. The show featured a mix of students from different ethnic backgrounds, including John Travolta's Italian-American Vinnie Barbarino, Lawrence Hilton Jacobs' African-American Freddie Washington, Robert Hagis's Puerto Rican Jewish Juan Epstein, and Ron Palillo's white Arnold Horshack, all learning together in the same remedial classroom. WCVB executives worried that this portrayal of students from various racial and ethnic groups getting along and working together might either inflame viewers who opposed integration or be perceived as making light of the serious racial issues the city was facing. However, the station's boycott of the show didn't last long. After Welcome Back, Kotter aired its first 4 episodes on ABC stations across the rest of the country and became an immediate ratings hit. WCVB realized they were missing out on a popular and profitable program. The station finally relented and began broadcasting the series, proving that sometimes entertainment can overcome even the most serious social and political concerns when it becomes successful enough. Fact 5. Steve Guttenberg was Travolta's secret stunt double. Years before Steve Guttenberg became famous for making audiences laugh in the Police Academy movies, he had a brief and unusual connection to Welcome Back, Kotter that most people never noticed, serving as John Travolta's body double in a surprising place. During the height of the show's popularity, toy companies were eager to cash in on the Sweathog's success by creating all kinds of merchandise, including board games that would let fans bring the classroom comedy into their own homes. One of the most popular pieces of Welcome Back Kotter merchandise was a board game called Up Your Nose with a Rubber Hose, which was named after Vinnie Barbarino's most famous catchphrase that had become a nationwide phenomenon among kids and teenagers. Like most toy products of the 1970s, this board game needed a television commercial to advertise it to potential buyers, and the manufacturers wanted to make the commercial as authentic as possible by featuring the actual characters from the show. However, there was a problem with getting the real cast members to appear in the commercial. John Travolta and the other actors were busy filming the television series and had scheduling conflicts that made it difficult for them to take time away from their regular work to shoot a separate advertisement for the board game. The solution that the commercial producers came up with was to use lookalikes and body doubles who could stand in for the original cast members. This is where Steve Guttenberg entered the picture, long before he became a household name through his roles in movies like 3 Men and a Baby, Cocoon, and the Police Academy series. At the time, Guttenberg was just another young actor in Hollywood looking for work, and he happened to have the right physical build and appearance to convincingly portray John Travolta's character, Vinnie Barbarino, in the board game commercial. The commercial featured Guttenberg and other lookalikes playing the roles of the Sweathogs while demonstrating how the Up Your Nose with a Rubber Hose board game worked, giving viewers the impression that they were watching the actual cast members from the television show. For anyone who happened to catch this commercial during its brief run, they were unknowingly witnessing an early appearance by someone who would later become one of the biggest comedy stars of the 1980s. Fact 6. Italy renamed the show Saturday Night Boys. Italian television executives made a deliberate attempt to trick their audiences by completely changing Welcome Back Kotter's title to something that would mislead viewers into thinking they were watching content related to John Travolta's biggest movie success. In 1980, one of Italy's 2 national television networks decided to purchase and broadcast Welcome Back Kotter, but they had a very specific reason for wanting to air this particular American sitcom at that time. John Travolta had become an international superstar thanks to his electrifying performance as Tony Manero in Saturday Night Fever, the 1977 dance drama that had taken the world by storm and made disco culture a global phenomenon. Italian audiences, like moviegoers everywhere, had fallen in love with Travolta's charismatic dancing and his portrayal of the Brooklyn youth who lived for Saturday nights at the local disco, and the film had been a massive box office success throughout Europe. When the Italian network acquired the rights to broadcast Welcome Back Kotter, they saw an opportunity to capitalize on Travolta's movie fame by making audiences believe they were getting more content connected to Saturday Night Fever. Instead of keeping the show's original title or creating a direct Italian translation of Welcome Back Kotter, the network executives made the calculated decision to rename the series I ragazzi del sabato sera, which translates to The Saturday Night Boys in English. This misleading title was clearly designed to create confusion among Italian viewers who might assume they were about to watch a television series that was somehow related to or spun off from Saturday Night Fever. The connection was completely false. Since Welcome Back, Kotter had actually premiered 2 years before Saturday Night Fever was released and had nothing whatsoever to do with disco dancing, nightlife, or the character of Tony Manero that had made Travolta famous in the movie. The Italian network even went so far as to create a new theme song for their version of the show, replacing John Sebastian's Welcome Back with a song called Call Me in America, performed by a group called Pop Welcome. This elaborate rebranding effort demonstrates just how far television executives were willing to go to exploit Travolta's movie stardom, even if it meant completely misrepresenting what the show was actually about to their unsuspecting audiences. Fact 7. The mysterious lunchbox scene that never existed. One of the most puzzling mysteries surrounding Welcome Back, Kotter merchandise became the subject of an actual investigation when someone noticed that the artwork on the official lunchbox depicted a scene that apparently never happened in any episode of the show. The lunchbox, which was released in 1977 during the height of the series' popularity, featured what appeared to be a detailed illustration of the Sweathogs, engaged in some kind of elaborate knot-tying prank or activity, with their shirt sleeves tied together in a complex pattern. This unusual artwork caught the attention of a man named Jonathan, who became so fascinated by the mysterious scene that he spent considerable time trying to figure out where it came from. What bothered him most was that the image seemed far too complicated and specific to be something an artist would just make up. Yet he couldn't remember ever seeing anything like it in any episode he had watched, despite being a dedicated fan of the show. Jonathan's curiosity eventually led to a full investigation that was documented on a podcast called Mystery Show, where host Starlee Kine decided to help solve the puzzle of the missing lunchbox scene. The investigation involved watching all the episodes from the first 3 seasons of Welcome Back, Kotter, which was when the lunchbox was produced, searching specifically for any scene that matched the knot-tying artwork or anything even remotely similar to it. The investigators divided up the episodes and watched them systematically, looking not just for the exact scene but for any incidents involving knots, pranks, hijinks, or even people wearing denim shirts that might have inspired the lunchbox artwork. They noted that denim was extremely common throughout the show, with characters wearing denim jackets, jeans, and shirts in almost every episode, but they could never find anything that resembled the specific knot-tying scene depicted on the lunchbox. After watching dozens of episodes spanning multiple seasons, the investigators came to a startling conclusion. The scene on the lunchbox simply did not exist anywhere in the actual television series. This discovery led to speculation that the artist who created the lunchbox artwork may have never actually watched Welcome Back, Kotter, and instead created an entirely fictional scene based on limited information about the show's characters and setting, resulting in official merchandise that depicted events that never happened on screen. Fact 8. Epstein thought he was cast as Barbarino. Robert Heggies experienced one of the most awkward moments in television casting history when he discovered he had completely misunderstood which character he was supposed to play, learning the truth in the most embarrassing way possible. After going through the audition process for Welcome Back Kotter, Heggies received the exciting news that he had been cast in the show, but somehow he came away from the casting experience believing that he had landed the role of Vinnie Barbarino, the cool and confident leader of the Sweathogs who would become the show's breakout character. This mix-up was particularly significant because Vinnie Barbarino was considered the most desirable role among the 4 main Sweathog characters, since he was designed to be the group's charismatic leader and the character that female viewers would find most attractive. Barbarino was supposed to be the smooth-talking Italian-American teenager who thought he was irresistible to girls and served as the unofficial spokesman for the remedial class, making him the kind of role that could launch an actor's career. Heggies showed up for his first day of work completely prepared to play Barbarino, having studied the character and mentally prepared himself to portray the swaggering, confident teenager who would deliver catchphrases like, "Up your nose with a rubber hose," and "What? Where?" with perfect comedic timing. He was probably excited about the opportunity to play such a prominent character and may have even told friends and family about landing this important role. However, his misunderstanding was cleared up in the most uncomfortable way possible when he found himself in an elevator with executive producer Alan Sachs and a young actor named John Travolta. During this elevator ride, Heggies realized that Travolta was actually the person who had been cast as Vinnie Barbarino, which meant that his own role was something completely different than what he had been expecting. It turned out that Heggies had actually been cast as Juan Luis Pedro Filippo de Huevos Epstein, the Puerto Rican Jewish character who was known for his forged excuse notes and his attempts to talk his way out of trouble. While Epstein was certainly an important and memorable character, he was quite different from the cool and confident Barbarino that Heggies had been preparing to play, requiring him to quickly adjust his entire approach to the role and the show. Fact 9. Charlie's Angels stars almost played. Mrs. Kotter. Two future television superstars came very close to taking their careers in completely different directions when they auditioned for a supporting role on Welcome Back, Kotter that would have prevented them from becoming the iconic crime-fighting trio known as Charlie's Angels. During the casting process for the show in 1975, producers were looking for an actress to play Julie Kotter, the patient and understanding wife of teacher Gabe Kotter, who would serve as a supportive presence in his life while he dealt with the daily challenges of teaching the unruly sweathogs. Among the actresses who tried out for this role were Farrah Fawcett and Kate Jackson, both of whom were relatively unknown performers at the time, but would soon become two of the most recognizable faces on television. Fawcett had appeared in some television commercials and had small roles in shows like The $6 Million Man, while Jackson had been working steadily in television with appearances in series like The Rookies and other crime dramas, but neither had yet achieved the kind of stardom that would make them household names. If either Fawcett or Jackson had been cast as Julie Kotter, the entire landscape of 1970s television might have been dramatically different. The role of Julie Kotter was designed to be a recurring but secondary character, appearing in episodes to provide domestic scenes and support for Gabe Kotter's home life, but it would not have offered the same kind of visibility and career opportunities that Charlie's Angels would eventually provide. The role of Julie Kotter ultimately went to Marcia Strassman, who had previously tried her hand at a singing career with limited success and would bring her own energy and personality to the character. Strassman became good friends with Kate Jackson after the casting process, and Jackson even gave her a motorcycle as a gift for her 30th birthday, though this generous present would later lead to an unfortunate accident that required Strassman to get 10 stitches and plastic surgery. Meanwhile, Fawcett and Jackson were free to audition for other projects, which led them to be cast in Charlie's Angels when that show began production in 1976. Their roles as private investigators Jill Monroe and Sabrina Duncan would make them international stars and cultural icons, proving that sometimes missing out on one opportunity can lead to something even better and more career-defining. Fact 10. The cast's secret musical careers. While most people know that John Travolta had a successful recording career alongside his acting work, several other members of the Welcome Back, Kotter cast also tried their luck in the music industry with varying degrees of success and failure. During the height of the show's popularity in the mid to late 1970s, it seemed like every television star was expected to release at least one album or single to capitalize on their fame, and the Sweathogs were no exception to this trend. Gabe Kaplan, who played the title character, decided to record a novelty single that played directly off his show's most famous catchphrase. In 1976, he released Up Your Nose with a Rubber Hose, which took Vinnie Barbarino's signature line and turned it into what was essentially a comedy song rather than a serious musical effort. Despite being more of a joke than a genuine attempt at pop stardom, Kaplan's novelty record actually managed to climb all the way to number 91 on the Billboard charts, proving that fans were eager to buy anything connected to their favorite television characters. However, the most overlooked musical effort from the Welcome Back Kotter cast came from Lawrence Hilton Jacobs, who played the ultra-cool Freddie Boom Boom Washington and decided to pursue a legitimate recording career rather than just capitalizing on his television fame. In 1978, Hilton Jacobs released a self-titled album that showcased his genuine musical talents and featured a song called "Fly Away to My Wonderland" that actually became a minor hit on the soul charts. Unlike Kaplan's novelty effort, Hilton Jacobs' album was a serious attempt to establish himself as a recording artist, and his smooth vocal style and the professional production quality of his songs demonstrated that he had real musical ability beyond his acting skills. The album showed influences from the disco and soul music that was popular during that era, and "Fly Away to My Wonderland" in particular had the kind of sophisticated sound that could have led to a successful music career if it had received more promotion and radio play. These musical side projects reflected the broader trend of television actors trying to expand their careers during the 1970s, when the line between entertainment categories was more fluid and stars were encouraged to explore multiple talents rather than focusing exclusively on acting. Fact 11. Marcia Strassman's motorcycle accident and prayer for cancellation. Marcia Strassman, who played Julie Kotter on the show, experienced both physical injury and professional misery that made her time on Welcome Back Kotter far more difficult than most fans ever realized. The actress had developed a close friendship with Kate Jackson, one of the future Charlie's Angels stars who had previously auditioned for Strassman's role, and their friendship continued even after Jackson moved on to other projects and achieved enormous success with her crime-fighting television series. When Strassman's 30th birthday arrived, Kate Jackson decided to give her friend a very generous and exciting gift: a brand new motorcycle. This was an unusually expensive and thoughtful present that demonstrated the genuine affection between the two actresses, and Strassman was thrilled to receive such a unique and adventurous birthday gift that would allow her to experience the freedom and excitement of motorcycle riding. Unfortunately, Strassman's enthusiasm for her new motorcycle led to a serious accident that left her with lasting physical damage. Not long after receiving the birthday gift, she was involved in a nasty crash while riding the motorcycle that resulted in a deep gash on her cheek. The injury was severe enough that she required 10 stitches to close the wound, and even after the initial medical treatment, she needed plastic surgery to properly repair the damage and minimize the scarring that could have affected her appearance on camera. However, Strassman's physical injuries from the motorcycle accident were not the only source of her unhappiness during her time on Welcome Back Kotter. In 1978, she gave a remarkably candid interview to People magazine in which she revealed just how much she disliked working on the show and expressed feelings that were completely at odds with the cheerful, supportive character she played on screen. During this interview, Strassman made the shocking admission that she prayed every day for cancellation of Welcome Back Kotter, demonstrating just how miserable her experience had become. She also specifically mentioned her difficulties working with Gabe Kaplan, suggesting that there were serious personality conflicts or professional disagreements happening behind the scenes that made her job much more unpleasant than viewers could have imagined while watching her portray the loving and patient wife of the beloved teacher. Fact 12. The bizarre Fonzie, Sweathog's crossover song. One of the strangest pieces of novelty music from the 1970s combined two completely unrelated television shows in a way that made absolutely no logical sense, creating a disco song that brought together characters who existed in different time periods and had never actually met. In 1976, a member of the Bronx doo-wop group called the Belmonts named Frank Linden decided to capitalize on the popularity of both Happy Days and Welcome Back Kotter by creating a musical crossover that defied all rules of television continuity. The resulting song was called The Fonzie Slide, and it appeared on an album called Fonzie Favorites that was released by Jukebox International Records as part of the merchandising craze surrounding Henry Winkler's iconic character. What made this song particularly bizarre was that it attempted to create a story that brought together the Fonz from Happy Days, which was set in the 1950s, with the Sweathogs from Welcome Back, Kotter, which took place in the contemporary 1970s. The song was structured more like a comedy skit than a traditional disco number, with Lyndon performing all the character voices himself over a generic boogie beat that was typical of mid-70s dance music. In the story told through the song, the Fonz rides his motorcycle into what is described as the annual Sweathogs school dance, creating an impossible meeting between characters from different shows, different decades, and different fictional universes. During this imaginary encounter, Arnold Horshack asks the Fonz if he has arrived to become the new leader of the Sweathogs, which seemed unlikely given that the Fonz should have been pushing 40 years old by the time the Sweathogs were attending high school in the 70s. The entire premise was so ridiculous that it highlighted just how disconnected the song was from any realistic understanding of either television series. Frank Lyndon's attempt to capture the voices and personalities of the beloved characters was notably unsuccessful, with his impressions missing the mark so significantly that the song became more of an unintentional comedy than the fun novelty record it was intended to be. The song stands as one of the stranger examples of how merchandising companies in the 1970s were willing to combine popular properties in ways that made no sense just to try to capitalize on multiple fandoms at once. Fact 13. Travolta's mother opposed his Barbarino role. John Travolta's career-defining role as Vinnie Barbarino almost never happened because his own mother strongly advised him against taking the part, fearing that it would typecast him as a stereotypical tough guy and limit his future opportunities in Hollywood. When Travolta was offered the role of the swaggering, leather jacket-wearing leader of the Sweathogs in 1975, he was just 21 years old and relatively new to the entertainment industry, making his mother's concerns particularly influential during this crucial decision-making period. Mrs. Travolta was worried that playing Vinnie Barbarino would pigeonhole her son as a Brooklyn street tough and prevent him from being considered for more sophisticated or diverse roles in the future. She feared that casting directors and producers would only see him as the kind of actor who could play working-class Italian-American characters, rather than recognizing his broader range and potential as a performer who could handle different types of parts. Her concerns were not entirely unreasonable, given that many actors in Hollywood had found themselves trapped in specific character types after becoming too closely associated with particular roles or personas. The entertainment industry in the 1970s was still quite rigid about typecasting, and actors who became known for playing certain kinds of characters often struggled to break free from those limitations and expand into other areas of their careers. However, Travolta decided to ignore his mother's well-intentioned advice and accept the role of Vinnie Barbarino, a decision that would prove to be one of the smartest moves of his entire career. Rather than limiting his opportunities, playing Barbarino actually opened doors for him and demonstrated his natural charisma and screen presence to audiences and industry professionals alike. The success of Welcome Back, Kotter led directly to Travolta's casting in major motion pictures, including his breakout film roles in Carrie and Saturday Night Fever, which established him as a legitimate movie star rather than just a television actor. His mother's fears about typecasting turned out to be completely unfounded, as Travolta was able to use his Barbarino fame as a stepping stone to much bigger and more varied roles that showcased his dancing, singing, and dramatic acting abilities across multiple decades of entertainment success. Fact 14. The real Arnold Horshack existed. While most of the Sweathog characters were based on real people from Gabe Kaplan's high school days with slightly altered names to protect their identities, Arnold Horshack was unique because he was the only character who kept his actual real-life name from Kaplan's memories of New Utrecht High School in Brooklyn. This unusual decision to use someone's real name made Arnold Horshack different from all the other characters in the show, who had been given fictional names that were inspired by but not identical to their real-world counterparts. When Kaplan was developing the characters for Welcome Back, Kotter, based on his own experiences as a student in remedial classes, he drew inspiration from specific classmates he remembered from his teenage years in Bensonhurst during the late 1950s and early 1960s. For most of these characters, he made deliberate changes to their names to create some distance between the fictional versions and the real people who had inspired them. Vinnie Barbarino was actually a combination of two real people: Eddie Licari, who was one of Kaplan's fellow sweathogs, and a tough kid named Joey Colucci that executive producer Alan Sachs had met during his own junior high school days. Freddie Boom Boom Washington was based on someone called Freddie Ferdy Payton, while Juan Epstein was inspired by a student known as Epstein the Animal, whose name was clearly modified for television. However, when it came to the character of Arnold Horshack, Kaplan made the surprising decision to use the exact same name as the real person who had inspired the role. There actually was a student named Arnold Horshack who attended New Utrecht High School at the same time as Kaplan. And this real person served as the direct inspiration for the goofy, enthusiastic character who would become famous for his distinctive laugh and eager hand-raising in Mr. Kotter's classroom. This means that somewhere out there, assuming he was still alive when the show became popular, there was a real Arnold Horshack who could watch Welcome Back, Kotter, and see a character bearing not only his exact name, but also personality traits and behaviors that were based on his own teenage years in Brooklyn. It's fascinating to imagine what that experience might have been like for the real Arnold Horshack, watching his name and characteristics become part of American pop culture history. Fact 15. Teachers' union demanded on-set representation. The production of Welcome Back, Kotter faced an unusual demand from educators who were concerned that the show might damage the reputation of their entire profession, leading to a behind-the-scenes conflict that revealed how seriously teachers took their public image during the 1970s. Teachers in various cities across the country had heard about the upcoming sitcom that would feature a high school classroom setting, and many of them were worried about how their profession would be portrayed to millions of television viewers every week. These concerns were not entirely unreasonable, given that television shows had the power to shape public perception about different careers and lifestyles, and teachers were already dealing with challenges related to respect and recognition for their important work in society. The idea of a comedy show set in a remedial classroom, featuring unruly students and potentially incompetent educators, raised red flags for professional organizations that worked hard to maintain dignity and respect for teaching as a career. To address these concerns, a teachers' union made the unprecedented demand that they be allowed to place a representative on the set of Welcome Back, Kotter, who would monitor the production and ensure that the show portrayed teachers and the education system in a responsible and respectful manner. This union representative would essentially serve as a watchdog to protect the image of the teaching profession and prevent any storylines or characterizations that might reflect poorly on educators. However, Gabe Kaplan, who was both the star and co-creator of the series, strongly opposed this idea and found the union's demand to be both unnecessary and potentially interfering with the creative process of making television entertainment. When a reporter asked him about the teachers' union wanting representation on set, Kaplan responded with characteristic sarcasm that perfectly captured his feelings about the situation. He asked the reporter whether there was a junkman on the set of Sanford and Son to protect the reputation of junkmen, pointing out the absurdity of having professional representatives monitoring every television show that depicted their particular line of work. Kaplan's comparison highlighted how unusual and potentially problematic it would be if every profession demanded the right to oversee how they were portrayed in fictional entertainment, and his witty response demonstrated that he had no intention of allowing outside interference with the show's creative direction and comedic content.